And I also just think the idea of building one single core offer and being able to replicate that over and over was super appealing to me because I had so many different things. It was like, how do I take everything that's in my head, and my expertise over not only the 9 years of owning the agency, but then also the other, 5-6 years before that where I worked for somebody else, and then take that and use all that knowledge into something that's simple and easy to replicate.
Welcome, everybody. We are joined here with Rob, and today we're jamming on a little bit about his experience working with alt agency. Rob, thanks for hopping on. Can you kind of tell everybody that's potentially watching this who you are and what you guys do?
Yeah, so I'm the owner of Dietz Group. We're a digital marketing agency based in North Carolina, but we help clients all over the country, and we specifically focus on small local service businesses and helping them gain exposure, drive leads through local search.
I love it. So what I kind of want to focus on first, I know it's been a minute, but flashback to before we started working together and before you started kind of applying some of the systems and principles and approach that we talk about at alt agency. What do you feel like were the challenges that you were facing or the frustrations that you had when it came to kind of growing the business and taking it to the next level? Yeah.
So I think, probably like a lot of agency owners who have grown from nothing to where they're at now is, initially when I started, I was taking anything I could get. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, that, flash forward, 9 years at that point, the agency had turned into really a custom delivery by client situation. It was extremely hard to take any of the fulfillment off of me. So, everything was run through me, but that was also making me the biggest bottleneck to any sort of consistent growth. And, we had done well. I mean, we had grown every single year for 9 years straight, but we had kind of plateaued, the last 2 years before I kind of looked in and engaged with you all. And I just was having a hard time getting over this plateau and getting to the next level. And, I was the biggest bottleneck, and I was trying to figure out a way. I knew that I needed to really simplify things and streamline things, but just how to get there was the biggest challenge without, destroying the business in the meantime.
Yeah, totally. I'm sure a lot of people resonate that. And for context, if you remember, despite everything being bottleneck on you, what did the team look like, and how many clients were active and being managed at the time?
Yeah, so my team was about 5 people, and everybody's remote, and we were managing at that time somewhere between 25 to 30 clients on a monthly retainer, and we were at about 50 to 60K of monthly recurring revenue.
Cool. And so then flash forward a tiny bit in the timeline, you were kind of feeling like the bottleneck, you were kind of plateauing, and then you kind of came across our stuff. And it was a while ago, but I forget if it was through kind of one of our ads or trainings, or if it was just our YouTube channel. But when you first started hearing the way that we were talking about streamlining business, what was it that what was your initial reaction, or what caught your attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, the interaction with you, and my dog is moving around in the background.
That's all right.
Having a young family, being able to find a better work-life balance, and, that discussion with you initially, I think was probably one of the biggest drivers, when I was kicking things off. And I also just think the idea of building one single core offer and being able to replicate that over and over was super appealing to me because I had so many different things. It was like, how do I take everything that's in my head, and my expertise over not only the 9 years of owning the agency, but then also the other, 5-6 years before that where I worked for somebody else, and then take that and use all that knowledge into something that's simple and easy to replicate.
Yeah, I remember, I feel and correct me if I'm wrong, the vibe that I got when we first had that conversation was you were working a lot, and back to you pointing on kind of like lifestyle piece, it seemed like it was starting to take a toll. Was there any sort of like, I know like we have some people that come in and they kind of, I know I need to do something about this, but then they still kind of drag their feet or they hesitate. Was there any sort of like hesitation, or do you have any sort of concerns or objections, like kind of coming in, kind of going from where you had been, like every client's custom, to like now taking this thing to one core offering?
Yeah, I think, probably the biggest concern, which I think probably a lot of people would have, is like, I don't have the ability to just like get rid of all that business, and how do I still maintain that business while also trying to streamline? And then also, how do I then transition that current business into this model? I think that was probably the biggest like roadblock I had, to actually like taking the step to doing it, is like, I couldn't comprehend like how I would be able to simplify that without like totally destroying the business and what the revenue that we had.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I'm sure a lot of people resonate with that. So like, all right, so what finally was the tipping point where you're like, okay, despite that, I'm going to do something about this?
I think it's probably a combination of things. I mean, on the personal side, my uncle unfortunately had passed away a year prior, and he had run an agency for 30 years. He was kind of like my mentor for starting things up. But, he did everything, so like when he passed away, I mean, his agency didn't survive 2 months because everything went through him, and I think just that idea of like, if something were to happen and I, got sick or something, like everything would crash and burn, I didn't want that situation to happen. And I think too, my kids were getting a little bit older. They're very active in things. And I think on one of the conversations, there was an example, or maybe it was a case study where you were talking about, another client who had, was taking phone calls at soccer games.
Oh yeah. Josh. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had that situation happen, actually a couple of weeks prior to when we talked, and it was kind of like, I'm tired of the business constantly interfering with personal time with the family, and just something needed to happen and change.
I'm sure a lot of people feel that. So like you hop in, I guess, like hopping into the program, were there any surprises and or like those two kind of concerns? Where did we end up kind of once you hopped in?
Yeah, I think, I was probably a little bit slower to start just because, I had a challenge of managing my weekly workflow and being able to, consistently devote time into, working through the various modules, so I think, initially that was probably the biggest hurdle was, and then we got into the whole perfect week thing, and that really helped me better organize my time and devote the appropriate time. But yeah, I think when I jumped in, that was probably the most intimidating thing, is, okay, now I'm in here. I know how important this is, but okay, now how do I actually make this happen while I'm still, the main source of delivery?
Yeah. And well, so you mentioned the perfect week system. So like, did that help in kind of reevaluate how you're spending your time so that you could actually keep it a priority?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that was probably, I know it's one of the first things that, we go through, but to me, that was honestly one of the most important things that I needed to get dialed in to be able to do anything else, and I think once I was able to do that, it took me, a month and a half, 2 months to really even devote enough time to get that dialed in. But then once I was able to do that, everything else kind of fell in line.
Can you elaborate on, obviously that had a lot to do with you being able to kind of even just reshift how you were spending your time. And I know that some of the challenges you were facing coming into the experience in the first place was, the overworking and everything like that. So now when you look at your weeks, now that you've been running kind of that system for a while, what has that meant for the business, and kind of, are you still as tied, or are you kind of getting more of those moments that you had been looking for?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's still weeks. I mean, I would say to anybody, like, there's still going to be weeks where that doesn't happen. Like, I think that's just, in an ideal world, you implement that, and every single week after that is perfect, to the perfect week.
Right.
But, the biggest thing I would say is the biggest revelation that I had to come to terms with was, like, I can control my calendar and not let the clients control it. So like, before I would just leave these open windows where people could schedule, and they could schedule, up to the day before. And so I would have meetings pop up last minute. Getting control of that and setting times, that changed a lot, and I think that allowed me to now, like, I have Fridays, where I call it Flex Friday, where I don't have anything on the calendar. And so if I want to go out kayaking now that the weather is nicer, on Friday here and there, I can. It has allowed me that time to do that. But then also, I don't do stuff on the weekends anymore, which that was a pretty regular routine. Is, I would devote a couple hours here and there on Saturdays, a couple hours on Sundays, and then miss some key stuff that I didn't want to miss anymore. And now, like, since the start of the year, I haven't worked on a single weekend at all since then. So that's been awesome. I think that's probably the biggest game changer, not for, maybe for the business, but for me personally. That's
yeah. I mean, that's super important. If you're always burnt out and exhausted, like, it's going to be difficult to kind of lead from the front,
Yeah.
So obviously the structuring and setting the boundaries and expectations with clients had a big impact. Obviously now you have the Flex Fridays and you haven't been working weekends, which is great. Once you've installed a lot of the pieces and started applying the principles that you kind of learned through the experience, any other improvements or notable things that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, one of the modules that I kind of really think was most, like, the buy back your time thing, allocating tasks that really don't need to be on my plate to somebody who I can pay. I think that was probably another big, learning point for me. I have now somebody on my team who serves, as I call her, my operations assistant. Some people call him executive assistant, whatever.
Yeah.
Having her take over my inbox, was another key piece. That has, like, something as simple as that has dramatically changed, the way I operate. It's like, I would constantly be distracted by, hearing the ding of my inbox and jumping in there and get pulled into things. Now we just meet, I meet with her Monday through Thursday at 2:00. She gives me tasks from that. She takes care of the rest. And, the inbox that was probably several hours a day has now turned into like 30 minutes at the end of the day. That has really freed me up a lot to work on, all the elements of the core offer and, now selling that core offer, and growing the business, which is all the things that you've talked about,
Yeah,
that was those were kind of the biggest things, I think, for me.
I love it. Can you talk to anything around how the offer has evolved? Obviously, like, before it was whatever the client wanted. How have we streamlined and kind of narrowed things down?
Yeah. So, I mean, I had heard for several years, like, you need to streamline or niche down. Like, a lot of people talk about getting to a specific niche and heavily focusing on that, and we were basically offering SEO services, Google ad services to really anybody. Okay. So that's where that kind of custom thing is, we would be doing anything from, local retail stores to hospitals to all kinds of things all over the place. When we drill it down, our core offer is called Local Service Boost. Kind of started working off that in early fall of last year, paring that down to specifically working with local service businesses on local SEO and search ads. But that has even evolved from there to now, like, we're really working primarily with plumbers and HVAC. That's the area where we've seen the most growth. I just signed somebody up this morning for June 1 start, a plumber. So going from that, that first iteration where we were doing still a couple different services to now it's very focused on a couple niches. And, like, we've even simplified that offer even more. Now it's mostly local SEO with a little bit of ads thrown in there, but not as much, so We've taken that offer, and it was still not, it was good. It was much more simplified than what we were doing, but now it's even simpler to deliver and more profitable for us at the same time.
Yeah, that's huge. I think, like, the thing that we've seen the most, and I think kind of what I took from what you just said was, like, once we get, and this is why I say to everybody, like, hey, the first iteration of use narrowing it and simplifying it is going to look a lot different than what it looks like 3, 4, 5 steps removed, because you're going to keep finding those opportunities to refine it and ratchet it down. And the more that you get efficient on those pieces, now that there's fewer of them, like you said, like, you're getting things done in less time, there's less error, there's less back and forth, and all of that finds its way back to the bottom line, so So that's awesome. So there's obviously, as you kind of alluded to in the beginning, I'm guessing there's plenty of people that will watch this and they're in that state where it's like they take whatever they can get. And that's led to every client's kind of custom and getting these bespoke things. What would you say to the person who is in that state now that you're like on the other side of applying some of this stuff, like if they happen to be kind of considering hopping into alt agency?
I would say don't be afraid to leverage your expertise in your relationship with those current folks. Like that scared me a lot as I was like, if I want to get to this, like what am I going to do with the 30 some people that we already have? What I discovered, honestly, really, especially as we kind of now get into this like client transition stage the last couple months, is the people that we've been working with really trust us. And like, I haven't had a single person opposed to transition. They're like, listen, Rob, we trust you guys. Like you've been helping us since day one. If you think this is the better way to go with our budget, let's do it. I was super nervous to do that. And I think that was probably the biggest hesitation I had. We're kind of going back to like, what's going to happen to the business if I try to do all this?
Yeah.
But we haven't lost a single client. And like,
that's great.
We've been able to transition these people. And it's not all fully perfect yet. I mean, we're still working through that. But I think that's probably where a lot of people would be, is they're nervous about what to do with that. And I think for me, just going through it now myself, don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to, I think, leverage your expertise and your relationships that you've built.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great call out, because like we definitely have clients where, so they had the same hesitation, but then they're like, I'm okay if a couple of them end up leaving. But like you said, there's many of them that have that level of trust, and that when you share why you're making some of these adjustments and how it's in their best interest, that you might be pleasantly surprised with how many stay. I mean, like I know that we had a handful stay, and then we had a handful that like we knew were probably going to want to leave. We ended that on good terms, and we kind of transitioned out, and it ended up being better for both parties. And so don't think that like you're going to lose everybody. There's probably people that will just be right there with you, through the transition.
There may be some people that eventually, maybe they're just being nice now and then they start looking, but like we've also been able to add so much more incremental business at this point by focusing on that, where that is okay. And that's where maybe the process, I would say for me, I was probably a little bit slower than some of the people in getting through all the modules. Everybody has a different pace, as Lisa has told me numerous times. But yeah, I mean, even the people who I was like, gosh, there's no way. I mean, one of them, I was, we basically cut their certainly 75% of the services we were doing for them. And they were like, you do what you want to do, what you think is going to be the best for us. And we'll either do this in-house or we'll find somebody else to do those pieces. But we really like what you guys have done, and just focus on that.
I love that.
It's been awesome.
I'm glad and super pumped where it goes from here, right? You keep building on this and compounding effect. It's like it's only going to get better as long as you stay focused on the principles. So where can people find out more about you and what you do if they happen to watch and they're like, oh, I actually need to connect with him?
Yeah, deetsgroup.us. That's our website. All the information's on there. Happy to chat, help with anybody.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for sharing your story. Really appreciate it. I know it's going to help a lot of other people.
Yeah, absolutely.